All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. My name is Brittany Morrison. I am one of the youth reps from the Black Youth Collaborative. The Black Youth Collaborative is a collective of 20 Black students and 43 Black and ally organizations from across the GTA, working together to strengthen the education system for Black students experiencing racism and discrimination. Before we get started, I would like to introduce Jada to present the Land and African Contribution Acknowledgement.
So this land is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and the Piton First Nations, the Seneca, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit River. The territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Iroquois Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Ojibwe and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Today, the meeting place of Toronto is still the home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. We recognize the enduring presence of the Indigenous people on this land. Additionally, in accordance with the International Decade for People of African Descent and the years beyond, we recognize the historical contributions and revolutionary acts of stolen Africans on stolen Indigenous land. These ancestors that have departed this world, leaving a legacy of hope and resilience. Due to the horrific historical impacts of colonization, we acknowledge how discrimination and racism is endured by its descendants and embedded in systems to this present day. On this day and every day, we acknowledge the ongoing global contributions of Africans and specifically Black Canadians to Canadian society.
Yes, Jada, thank you for that powerful acknowledgement. Big up to Shem for the playlist. Hi everyone, my name's Alana and I'm an equity and arts educator. Much of my work is dedicated to supporting Black youth and youth that are experiencing any type of marginalizations, and really just supporting communities to be self-determined, to create the communities that they want to live and work in and celebrate and just affirm their culture. So I just wanted to let folks know that to just please bear with me, because like this is a time of learning how to use these technical equipments. And I'm like, okay, highlight the resources. So the slide deck itself is, it's downloadable. So I'm just gonna put it in the chat box here for folks to download. We've got resources, you can follow along with the slide deck, and I know that some of our panelists will be sharing stuff as well. Okay, next slide. We're also working towards making resources available to French-speaking communities of African descent. So while we don't have any French-speaking staff or translators on this call, we'll upload a recording of it to the Stolen from Africa website. So that's www.stolenfromafrica.org. We'll also have an English recording with subtitles and a French version with subtitles. So that should be uploaded within a week. And then we'll also email out the resources to the email list that we have for everyone that registered.
Okay, all right. Thank you again for joining us today. So we created this panel because Black students and parents have concerns and worries about the uncertain times and remote learning. They also had lots of questions about anti-Black racism and their rights, about how anti-Black racism is impacting Black youth and their families.
Hi, my name is Jada, and I'm a youth rep on the Black Youth Collaborative. I will go over the agenda. So first, we're going to do some introductions where we're going to introduce our panelists. Then we're going to hear from the students, and then we're going to move on and have a conversation with the panelists. And then afterwards, we'll have a Q&A session where you'll be given an opportunity to ask some questions or say any of your concerns, and then we'll have a closing.
So now we will quickly introduce your panelists. Please give a wave or a fist when your name is called.
First, we have Nana Yanful. Nana is a staff lawyer at the Black Legal Action Clinic. Black is a nonprofit community legal clinic that provides free legal services for low or no income Black residents of Ontario.
Next, we have Chelsea Takalo. Chelsea is a student equity program advisor with the Toronto District School Board. Student equity program advisors coordinate, deliver, and organize workshops, resources, and student forums for students experiencing discrimination.
Okay, so next we have Nahuda Robinson. Nahuda is a co-founding director for Freedom Schools. Freedom School is a 3-week program for children aged 4 to 10. This is a project in response to the lack of humanizing, self-affirming, queer-positive educational opportunities for Black children in the GTA.
Mo Ahmed is an executive director of SBL, Success Beyond Limits. SBL is an in-school youth-led organization in Westview Secondary School. SBL staff provide academic and professional support services to increase graduation outcomes in youth in the Jane and Finch community.
Next, we have Tina Khan, who is the Vice Principal at Central Technical School in Toronto and the founder of its in-school program, Each One Teach One. Each One Teach One works to empower Black youth to break systematic barriers in Toronto high schools by connecting them to inspiring and influential members of the Black community to provide culturally responsive workshops.
Yes, we have instruction. I'm actually Thank you.
Our next member is Neil Dollinson. Is the founder of Stolen from Africa. Stolen from Africa is a lifestyle clothing brand and a nonprofit arts education organization that promotes African diaspora through education and the arts.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shem. I'm not sure if Nia's on the call and if he's here yet. Logic? Just give me a wave, Logic, if he's here or not.
Oh, no.
No worries. Okay, no worries. So we'll get back to that. Nia Singh will also be trying his best to join us. He's from Mahat Legal Services. So Mahat Legal Services is a social justice law firm that focuses on criminal defense, human rights, and police complaint matters. Nia may also be known for his legal and advocacy support for the family of Regis Korchinski-Paquette. Regis, just 29, passed after falling from a 24th floor balcony in Toronto while in the company of police who were there or who were supposed to be, who were called to help her. So we hopefully will be hearing more from Nia later. I just really want to say thank you to all the panelists and to all the folks that are on the call joining us today. Really appreciate you taking the time to joining us. I feel like we're in a very tough time, but we're also in a moment where young people are kind of taking to a lot of different outlets. I need to stop, but they're doing a lot. They're standing up and they're getting out and they're following the lead of keeping the advocacy piece alive and to keeping and organizing and keeping the work alive. So just thank you all for all that you do. So before we get into hearing more from the panelists, we're gonna first hear from Black students. We think it's really important that we center Black student voices when we're talking about issues that are impacting them and their families. So before we do that, we're thinking that it might also be helpful to do a collective brainstorm and a definition of some key terms, because everyone has different understanding of anti-Black racism and all the issues that are connected to it. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. There we go. Did I share the right screen? Okay, thank God. Okay, so we're gonna go to menti.com. If people can go to www.menti.com and enter the code 188037. If you're on the phone, you can also join. You just have to open up a different web browser. So I'm gonna go ahead and paste that information in the chat box, and I'll say the information again for folks that might be on the phone. So it's www.menti.com, spelled MENTI, and the code to enter is 188037.
Hi, everyone. Just to introduce myself, my name is Cicely. I'm also of the Black. I'm going to be facilitating the Menti activity. So I'm just gonna give some time for everyone just to put in their words for the anti-Black racism, and then we'll start with the activity. Okay, I feel like I keep adding, so I'm just gonna try and read off a couple of the words as it's moving. So I see oppression, systematic hate, oppression, Black, power, racism, anti-equality, white supremacy. I see superiority complex. Oh my God, it keeps on going. Okay, so we're just gonna stop from there. Thank you so much for everyone adding your words. I think we're gonna start off with defining anti-Black racism, but feel free to keep adding into your words. So anti-Black racism is a prejudice, attitudes, beliefs, stereotyping, or discrimination that is directed at people of African descent. And it is rooted from their unique history and experiences of enslavement and colonization. Anti-Black racism is deeply embedded in Canadian institutions, policies, and practices, to the point that it becomes a part of our systems. Thank you everyone for participating in the Key Terms activity. Now we're going to be hearing from Brittany.
Yes, so before I share my story, so my story is with the N-word. This being said, you know, I've experienced this on many occasions, but today I'm just gonna be focusing on one particular instance of the word being used. So I was on a bus heading back home from a wrestling meet, and I could hear non-Black students, you know, on the bus repeatedly saying this word, and just, you know, knowing the burden and just like knowing what that word means to me as a Black individual, and them using it so lightly, just like oblivious or like, you know, choosing to be ignorant of the fact, you know, I was really disapproving of them using the word. So I decided to, you know, share my opinion and my views and, you know, kind of tell them not to use the word. You know, I did that and they still, you know, continued using the word, at which point the bus came to a stop to let out a few kids at their school. And I took that opportunity to, you know, approach my teacher and basically just, you know, say what was happening. And the response that I got was definitely, you know, like disheartening to say the least. Like the response was along the lines of, you know, just ignore it, you know. And it's like, how do you even tell somebody to just ignore it? You know, what if you know, what if when the non-Black people use the N-word or, you know, does something, is like the response is not just you know, ignore it. It's much greater than that, you know. What if and that goes to show, you know, that the system is rigged against us regardless of what we do. They're always trying to shut us up, and that's something that, you know, we're not gonna stand for, you know. And that's like just my story.
Thank you so much, Brittany, for sharing your story. I know myself personally has my own N-word story. And can we just put an X in the chat box for anyone who has related to Brittany's story, who has been called the N-word? I see a lot of X's. Sadly, it seems like this is a rite of passage for the Black community. We all have our own N-word story. When does this stop? Before we hear from Yasmin, we'll define another key term. So if we can please just go back to menti.com and type in the same code, 188037. We'll wait a few seconds for the board to be populated. Oh, there we go. It's coming. Okay, so we have a couple of words. I see for microaggressions, I see hair, insensitive jokes, stereotyping, trauma, subtle racism, disrespect, doubt, lie of racism. I'll give it a couple more seconds just so I can get a couple more words, but I do see that we're filling up really quickly. Okay, before it becomes too much, I see subtle doubt, anti-Black racism, traumatic assumptions, power, witnesses. I see a bleep, I see ally, ignorance, assumptions. Like all of these words are so valid to microaggressions. I'm just gonna read off the actual definition of microaggressions. Okay. Microaggressions, a term first introduced by the Black Harvard professor and psychiatrist, Dr. Chester Pierce, is defined as subtle, stunning, often automatic, and nonverbal exchanges which are put downs of the Black people. The term was later expanded by Dr. Darrell Wing to include a brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, and communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative slights and insults to marginalized individuals or groups. And just again, thank you for everyone participating in the Menti activity. And now we're gonna hear from Yasmin.
So hello, everyone. My name is Yasmin, and I'm also a member of the Black Youth Collaborative. So my experience with microaggression is a very common one. And so basically what happened is when I would go to camp, I would be in the girls' cabin and I would take off my hijab, and I have super curly, frizzy hair. And then I would notice that a lot of the girls, they would just, stare at me in awe, and they would look at me as if I was some sort of artifact in a museum. And then they would come up to me and say, "Oh, wow, I love your hair. But is that your real hair or is that your natural hair?" And that right there, and then they would also start touching my hair. And that right there is a perfect example of microaggression. And so what the girl said to me may seem like a compliment at first because she's saying she loves my hair. But then when she added, "Is that your real hair or is that your natural hair?" That right there is subtle racism. And there's a common stereotype that Black women hair, like that the hair that we have is not real, or that we wear extensions all the time, or we have wigs, and that we can't have nice hair. And also what I realized when she touched my hair, it was sort of patronizing and dehumanizing because it made me feel like I was an animal that they could just pet. And I felt like I was being signaled out in front of everyone in the cabin. And also another example I faced with microaggression is that when I've met people for the first time, they would ask me, "Oh, where are you from?" And that question is just an expression of genuine curiosity. A lot of people ask that to try and connect and get to know you. But then when I would reply, "Oh, I'm Canadian, I'm from Canada," they'd be like, "No, where are you really from?" And that right there as well is another form of microaggression. And when people say that, it's really code for "you're a foreigner, you're not really Canadian." And they're essentially asking, where is the skin, where's your skin color from? So with that made me kind of feel like I was a foreigner in my own country. So yeah, those are some of my experiences with microaggression. And I'm sure there's a lot of stories similar to mine.
Yeah, no, trust me, Yasmin. Literally the same thing happens to me all the time. I constantly get questions about my hair, or even when I do different hairstyles. And I think a lot of people don't see how impactful that is for us as a Black community. And I just want to say thank you for sharing your story, because I know there's so much people in this call that feel what you're saying. I would like to invite all attendees to share the microaggressions that they've experienced, because I'm pretty sure a lot of us are going to be able to relate. Just before we hear from Olivia, we'll define another key term. So if we can all just go back to menti.com and type in the same code, just to reiterate, 188037. So I see we have some words under white privilege. I see racism, persuasive, colonial systems, white fragility, lacking accountability. We're getting some more shame, long-standing rooting, injustice, systematic racism, freedom, no accountability, white supremacy, division, unearned. Yes, keep rolling in. I'm sorry, it keeps moving, guys. It's a lot to read off of. I see ignorance. Ignorance is bliss. Snaps to that one, because it is bliss. All right, so I think we're gonna just move on from the words and just define white privilege. White privilege, or white skin privilege, refers to a societal privilege that benefits white people over non-white people. In some societies particularly, if they are otherwise under the same societal, political or economic circumstances. Thanks again for participating in the Menti. And now we're gonna hear from Olivia.
Hi, my name is Olivia, and I'm one of the youth reps for the Black Youth Collaborative. I wanted to share my experience of anti-Black racism in the school system. So I was assaulted and almost killed by a white student. The police were called and there were conditions placed. Even with this, the school did not want to suspend him or expel him. They told me they were just worried about his future because he was almost in grade 12. I know if I were white and he was Black, there would be a completely different outcome. They stated I was supposed to go to school with him and still go to class with him, and they would just impose a safety plan. This caused me to move schools as I feared for my life. I then wrote a letter explaining how I felt, and I was connected with Chelsea, who is on this Zoom meeting right now. And I then met with the superintendent and the principal and discussed the letter I wrote. I found this meeting to be unhelpful and dismissive. and that there was not going to be any consequences for the white student who assaulted me. It made me realize that there's a double standard and the school system does not protect Black students the way it protects white students. Even though I was an honor student, that did not matter. Even though I represented my school internationally, that did not matter. All of that did not matter because of the color of my skin. I realized I was set up to fail and that all Black students are ultimately set up to fail by the school system.
Thank you, Olivia, for sharing your story. I know a lot of us in this call are angered by hearing your story. It's so horrific. Your experiences are valid and it's such a powerful story to show to light how the school system is failing our Black students. Many Black students historically have been pushed out of schools for many different reasons. As a community, how do we document our stories so we can have accountability and an appropriate response to anti-Black racism? Before we hear from Shem, we'll define another key term. So if we can all collectively go back to menti.com and type in the same code, 188037. So the first word we have is unconscious bias, and I'll give a couple of seconds for the words to start rolling in. And just for any confusion, unconscious bias is also known as an implicit bias, just in case. So I have some words. I see crossing the street, racial bias, you are like me, unpacking, fear, excuse, implicit, ignorance, prejudice, deeply rooted, thoughtlessness, racist. Okay, I'm just gonna read off a couple more words. Assumptions, closed-minded. And thank you for adding the words. A lot of these are definitely related to an implicit bias. So just for the actual definition, unconscious bias or implicit bias is often defined as a prejudice or an unsupported judgment in favor or against one thing, person, or group, as compared to another. In a way, it's that it usually is considered unfair. Many researchers suggest that unconscious bias occurs automatically as the brain makes quick judgments based on past experiences and background. As a result of unconscious bias, certain people benefit and others are penalized. Thank you again for participating in the Menti activity, and now we're going to hear from Shem.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shem Ro. I'm a Black Youth Collaborative student member, and my story is about unconscious bias. So basically, my story took place about 2 weeks ago, and me and my cousin had bought 2 bikes. We had put the locks on the bikes outside my building, and I had lost the key on one of my bike rides. So I had to go get a bolt cutter to cut the lock. It was broad daylight, probably around 12 o'clock. I was cutting the lock. Took me a little while because it was a thick lock. And the white woman had come out of the building. I didn't assume anything was going to go wrong. I didn't know her. She didn't know me. It was broad daylight. No crime was taking place. Anyways, she had happened to call security. I didn't know this, so I went upstairs to go get my new bike lock I was going to put on the bikes. I came downstairs and the security had taken the bikes. Security guard had told me the situation. We made him realize it was our bikes, and he had realized him being a white security personnel, that it was race related. Anyways, my story just goes to show that basically white people have a mindset to assume Black people are doing anything in a negative way. I could be walking and they'd assume I'd be robbing somebody. I could be at the store and they assume I'm stealing. Luckily, no one had called the police. They just had called security, so it wasn't a big dramatic scene. But like any other Black person, it could have been. Thank you.
Thank you, Shem, for your story. Thank you all for your resilience and openness. I know everyone in this call has connected or related to your story in some way, because all of us are experiencing the same thing in different ways. So thank all the students for sharing.
Yes, definitely. Now we will take some time to quickly hear from our panelists before we jump into our Q&A session. So just to get a deeper understanding of the work you're doing and the resources you provide, please take 2 minutes to tell us more about your organization and just what you're doing during this pandemic and remote learning, and how Black students and families and the community has been impacted, by this pandemic. We will first start with Nana.
Hi, everyone. Is the sound okay? Awesome. Thank you so much to everybody for sharing those stories. I really appreciate being included in this conversation. It's an honor and a privilege to share space with you all right now, especially in the moment that we're going through. We know and we acknowledge as Black people that it's not new, but it's still impacting us, right? It's still impacting us in all these ways. So I just wanted to acknowledge that and just speak briefly about the Black Legal Action Center. We provide free legal services to Black folks who are experiencing anti-Black racism in various areas of the law. So, while when we opened last year, we thought many of our issues and the complaints would be around policing, and it's not to say that they aren't, but we are actually seeing some of the highest number of calls around education and the education system. At Black, we serve the entire province. So whether it's in Durham, in Toronto, or in Windsor, Thunder Bay, we're hearing stories from Black students, Black parents, caregivers who are experiencing the things that you all have shared today, and also the things that we've seen in reports for decades, right, about the disproportionate impact schooling has for Black students. So we've seen in COVID now an increase actually in calls outside of education. However, when you start to kind of dig down and dig deep, we're also hearing from families and parents saying, like, I'm struggling to provide the online learning. I'm struggling to maintain my work and also provide support for my kids. We're also hearing concerns around some of the technology that's being given out by the schools. Some parents are saying, we didn't sign anything. We're concerned, like, what if something gets damaged? Are we going to be charged? Like, there just hasn't been proper waivers and that kind of stuff on the legal end that we're kind of concerned about later on down the line. And I'll speak about this later on, but we're also concerned about suspensions and expulsions that weren't figured out prior to COVID, and what's happening to those students who may be suspended or maybe expelled during this time. What are their rights and what's going to be the impact when school reopens? So that's just a little snapshot of what we do at Black and what we're seeing during the pandemic right now.
Thank you very much for sharing. Now we're just gonna move on to Chelsea.
Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. I'm a student equity program advisor with the Toronto District School Board. Let me start this by saying, so I don't get myself in trouble, everything that I say and I share with you is not on behalf of the TDSB. It's on behalf of Chelsea, who's speaking based off of her experience as an employee of the TDSB. So let me just preface that so I don't get myself in trouble. So the Student Equity Program Advisor position is something that is only in the Toronto District School Board. There's no comparable positions in our fellow boards across Ontario. And the role of the CEPA was created specifically to support marginalized and underserved students. Part of that is gathering data from students. So just like all of those really vulnerable stories, thank you so much all for sharing. But we gather some of that data across the system to say what are the experiences of students and what are the strategies that students want to see implemented by schools to start solving and resolving some of those issues. What happens with that data is a whole other story. If schools are actually able to respond to that data is a whole other story. If action plans are created, which they are, but are followed up on, that's also another story. But we do gather the data so they have an understanding of experiences. The other segment of the CEPA position is advocacy. So any student in the TDSB can reach out to us as internal staff and say, I'm experiencing racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia, any form of intersecting discrimination in their school. And if they don't know how to navigate it, or their parents or guardians need support navigating it, we can actually support them through that entire process in the TDSB, and stand with them and stand by them to make sure that they get the best possible resolution, if possible internally, and if not possible internally, then what options they have externally to work through. In terms of COVID, a lot of the responses and supports that we've been doing is students feeling like teachers are not providing them with alternatives. Teachers are not being flexible with timelines and expectations. And another barrier that I've heard a lot that we've been supporting through is parents who have never had contact with teachers before because teachers have never connected with them. Now teachers are connecting with them to say your students are not doing A, B, C, D, and they are required to do A, B, C, D, which is incorrect information. So things like if a student is asking for an extension, the teacher saying they have to submit it by the deadline, which was this date, the parent saying, why aren't you submitting the work? The student saying there's so many barriers and I'm doing my best. But the parents really not understanding that the teacher is giving misinformation, not the student, but the teacher. So a lot of that work around correcting misinformation that's being provided and making sure that students and parents know what expectations are during COVID and what flexible options there are if students or parents are in need.
Thank you very much, Chelsea. We're just gonna move on to Mo.
Hey, what's up, y'all? So I'm in Success Beyond Limits. Our focus is to reduce the impact of external factors that negatively impact the educational success of youth in Jane and Finch. So how we do that is that we operate a 6-week summer program that offers credits, mentorship, youth employment, enrichment, nutrition engagement, graduation, and relationship building. We also continue our support through our presence within Western Centennial Secondary School, which is located in the Jane and Finch community. Shout out to those from Jane and Finch here. So through this space, our staff support youth during the school day, run after-school programs, and connect youth in an array of diverse opportunities. Right now, during the COVID, quarantine, we've been shifting and pivoting the work that we do and creating a youth space online virtually. So the youth space that we have that's in WestU is unique to Ontario. So what we want to do is keep what's happening in that space alive. So the relationships that are built, the advocacy that's shared, the mentors in our youth who are youth leaders who are working with the younger generation, that group of youth mentors have continued some of that work online by carrying some of the programs, activities, and doing it in a virtual way. Of course, it comes with challenges, but we've been doing our best to get through that. In terms of what I want to bring to this conversation is when it comes to what we're talking about, what we want to share is that advocacy is the biggest piece, but more importantly, letting young people instilling that feeling of, hey, you know what, if I'm ever in a situation, whether it could be with a teacher, it could be with someone in the community, it could be with anyone else, knowing that I know where to go, right? That's our important message that we've been putting out during this quarantine. Usually when we're in the space with them, when we're interacting with them physically, those conversations are happening all the time, right? And our key message to send out when we can only connect through the camera is that feeling of, you know what, no matter what happens, I know who to go to. I know who to ask. And if we can't answer it, then we have the supports of everyone else that includes this panel. So I wanted to say that. And also, of course, thank you so much to those young people that are sharing some of their vulnerable experiences, over Zoom with 115 people. So I really appreciate that. It's huge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you said, creating a sense of community. Yeah. But now we're just gonna move on to Nahuda. Nahuda.
Hi, can you guys hear me? Yeah, okay. So Freedom School Toronto, it's an initiative that was created by youth and Black parents in Toronto. It was created as a space to teach our kids how to be passionate about justice, how to resist against police brutality, state violence, and also how to learn about Black pride, self-love, Black resistance. and to learn about Blackness as a global thing. Sorry, 1 second. So we do have a summer program. We use an arts-based teaching, and one of our tenets that we use is transformative justice. So we don't do things like disciplines and escalating consequences. We get to the root of what these systematic errors and oppressions are that are creating the environment for the children. So a lot of what we do, especially with schools, is not only do kids come to us on their own with issues, or their parents come to us on their own, but we go into schools and we provide things like anti-Black racism training for parent councils, administrators. We also create programs with the administrators and the teachers to teach them how to create Black focused curriculum, how to integrate our identities, our culture into what they're teaching. So for this year, basically, our summer program, we've had to move online, but we've expanded it. So we do have youth that sort of, aged out of our program and now have a program of their own. So they head up the Transformative Justice program, and they help guide all the students and each other in being accountable with each other and learning about love and how to carefully correct certain things that are within our control, and then where to navigate and where to go to get help for the things that are beyond our control, like systemic issues. So we'll have our online program for our kids who are 6 to 12 years old. And so we'll be doing art programming, learning about histories of Black resistance, about global indigeneity.
All right. Okay, so we gotta cut you short, but thank you for sharing like just a snippet. Like I know you could go on. All of us could go on about like this for days, because it's things that we're passionate about. But just in the interest of time, we're just gonna hear from Logic.
Okay, peace, y'all. I won't take too much time up. What's going on, everybody? Logic, founder of Stolen from Africa, Black Arts Education Organization here in Toronto. We have a major focus on cultural and historical awareness of African diaspora, as well as Africa, and just empowering young people, advocacy, giving a voice, and all that good stuff. Much of our work is youth-centered, and we are located in Monsignor Fraser College, Midland campus, and we focus a lot on in-school programming, as well as like other supports. A lot of our focus is really about youth empowerment, empowering the educators as well as the community at large on race-based, human-based issues, and challenging stereotypes of ideas of Blackness by celebrating resistance and self-determination. When we're talking about what's happening with the pandemic and whatnot, one of our major responses is, again, like advocating for youth and just giving space for youth to speak and have their voices heard, just like creating this platform. We keep like a real strong ear to the streets, and we just really pay attention to what the youth are saying, and we just do what we can to amplify voices. So not to take up too much time, that's basically what we're about, man, just doing stuff in real time. So big up to all the youths, part of the collaborative, and we just got to keep it moving.
Okay, yes, so just before we go into the Q&A, I know that Naya wasn't here before, but is he here? Or is she here? Naya?
Oh, look at me, I almost forgot. That's Nia Singh. So
Nia, okay.
No worries, that's okay, Britannia, you're doing an amazing job. I just don't, I know that it cuts off at 100 and something, so I'm not sure if you'll be able to get in. If anyone knows how to get folks in, let me know, and then we can hopefully get them in. We're learning.
All right.
So we can continue
no
on.
Okay, so we'll just hand it over to Jada.
Okay. Over the last few months, we've gathered questions from Black students and families about anti-Black racism and the education system. The initial questions we will share have been frequently asked by Black youth and parents. We will begin these questions first and open up to questions from everyone on this call.
Hi, everyone. My name is Naya, and I'm a part of the Black Youth Collaborative. For those of you joining us on YouTube Live, you will also get a chance to ask questions. Please put them in the comment section below, and when we open it up, I'll share your questions. For the people on Zoom, please post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will share your questions with the panelists.
The questions are broken up into 3 themes: assignments and assessments, transition back to school and bias, and unfair treatment and suspensions. We have 10 minutes for the assignments and assessments section, so please give some background info, but focus your answers on student and parent rights and what actions they can take. So for the first question is for Tina. Tina, you're a teacher and a guidance counselor. When is the last day to submit assignments, and when do the report cards go out?
Hi, everyone. I'm part of Each One Teach One. We are a program that runs out of Central Tech. And what we do is we run a weekly workshop series for our students, and we invite Black mentors and community members to come and work with our students to help them work through issues that impact their engagement in school. When it comes to the last day assignments, this is our last week of secondary school, so students should be focusing on getting all their work in at some point this week and communicating with their teachers to see when their ultimate deadlines are. The very, very, very last day you could submit work and hope that a teacher marks it and puts that mark towards your final mark would be Monday, June 22nd, because marks are absolutely due on June 23rd.
Sorry to interrupt. I think Nia is here now. Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Yeah, we passed you. We just need you. Thank you for joining us again. We just want you to share like a bit of information of how you guys, how your organization is dealing with this pandemic, what resources are providing, and how you see it affecting Black students and families, and the community.
Yes, well, I apologize for this circumstance. I'm actually at the coroner's building, and we're dealing with the unfortunate death of Regis Korchinski-Paquette. And I know that I was scheduled to do this, but both came at the same time. But what I can tell you is our firm has been inundated since the actual pandemic has started, and that's mainly because mental health is being affected throughout the city, throughout the world, actually. And it's definitely taken a toll on families. And not only are we seeing young people getting into minor trouble, but their parents and their extended family have been even more severely affected. Usually it's, the normal concern, but in this pandemic time, it's heightened. So I do want to say that it's a difficult time period. But I think what we can say is our community has constantly suffered through difficult times, and a lot of us are used to high amounts of stress, where other communities normally don't have this type of intense feeling that we have now. So I can say that it's a balance. Some people are used to it and some people aren't. But I want to answer any questions you have. I know you're asking about the pandemic, but if there's anything specific to knowing rights and anything like that, I'd be glad to answer that. And I'll apologize again under the circumstances that I'm able to answer these questions.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks again for joining us. We'll get into those questions later on in our discussion. But, just again, we're just going to hand it back over to Jada so she can pick off where she just left off.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
All right, so the next question is for Chelsea. The Ministry of Education and its directions to schools shortly after the shutdown was as of March 13th. Students' marks could not go down. How do I know what marks I have right now, and how can I make sure I won't be punished or if I'm not able to finish my assignments.
Sorry, I'm unmuting. Hey, everyone. So everyone, all the teachers are expected to be able to provide you with what's called a mark book breakdown. So a mark book breakdown is basically a system or a list of all of the assignments that are graded that you are responsible for. So if you say, can I have a breakdown of my mark book? Every single teacher that you should ask will be able to provide you with that breakdown that says culminating assignment worth 30%, etc. And this was your mark. That will allow you to see if you missed assignments that you weren't aware of. And if you did miss assignments, you can request to redo those assignments, especially if they happened before the March break, because those will directly impact your mark if you could bring it up from before the March break. But basically the easiest answer is ask for a mark book breakdown from your teacher.
Thank you, Chelsea. Another follow-up question for you. Some students may feel like their mark is that they get is unfair. What is the process to appeal marks?
Wonderful question. So the complaint process in most school boards, and definitely in the CSB, is if you're unhappy with something, then you go to the administrator. So that should be the vice principal or the principal. If you feel comfortable having your parent involved through this process, it makes it much easier. And it creates a different sense of accountability on the school end. The other thing that's really important is you want to put everything you can in writing. Put it in email, put it in writing, copy whoever you need. So if that means you're copying the teacher and your parent and the vice principal and the principal, then that's what you want to do and need to do. And for those of you who are trying to find, well, how do I get these emails? Almost every email is the first name, period, last name at, for example, tdsb.on.ca or pdsb.on.ca if you're in Peel. But writing it down is critically important, as well as going to the administrator. And if you need to do this now, do it as soon as possible, since marks are due next week.
Thank you, Chelsea. This next question is for Nyota. We're hearing from parents that they're worried that their child may fall behind if they don't complete all their assigned work that they're getting from their teachers. How can parents support their child's mental health and well-being without feeling like they have to force them to complete work?
Good question. You can ask for support. So a lot of what we've been doing these days is providing emotional support for children and just letting them know that we're all going through this, that it is a stressful time and that their feelings are very valid, and that having to navigate through schoolwork and home life and everyone's emotions is actually very difficult. So we are more than happy to be copied on any emails that you need for administrators, any requests that you have anywhere. If you're not getting through, we're able to do that as well. What parents can do is take their time. It's a high pressure situation. I think a lot of these, the pressure questions are getting answered here. Outside of that, you know, it's really the most advice I can do is give your time, take your time and try and explain things to your children in a way that they are going to understand. They don't need to hear every detail of what's going on. That's stressful for the parent, that's stressful for the child, and it creates more trauma for everybody.
Thank you. We have a few minutes left for this section. Do any of the panelists want to add any additional info to the questions we asked this section?
Sorry, I was just going to say, I'm taking notes, and I've also copied and pasted some resources into a live document. I'm going to copy that document and put it into the link for all participants if you wanted to see and or access it right now.
So real quick, I just saw in the comments that someone mentioned supports for substance use for people who do not want to go to CAMH. Right off the top that came up to mind was, I know that Strides Canada, formerly known as East Metro, they have the What's Up walk-in clinic, and I believe there's some supports there. And then another one that comes to mind right off the top is Taibu in Scarborough. I'm sure there's others. if you need more information, definitely send a message in the chats and we can definitely plug you in. Thanks.
Thank you. Shem will ask the next questions for the next section.
Thanks, Jada. The next section of questions.
Sorry, I was just going to chime in on the last thing about mental health. I'm sorry, brother. My phone was on mute. I just want to say that parents can actually make sure they help their kids by showing them the value of knowledge and education. Far too often, I think our students are given information that's not useful to them, something they don't care about. But if things relate to their lives personally, or the family or the support systems can show how valuable the knowledge and information is, then I think you would get a better buy-in from the students. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you. Thanks, Jada. The next section of questions is on transitions. We have 10 minutes for this section and 3 questions. Everyone wants to know what will happen in schools next year. We know the Ministry of Education and schools are still in the planning stages, but we'd really like to know what community groups and schools are working on or planning on for the next school year. The first question is for Mo, Logic, Nahuda, and Nahuda. Question number 1 is, we'll start with the community groups first. This question is for Mo. Oh, sorry about my bad. What are the community groups doing behind the scenes to prepare for next year? Mo, you're first.
Yeah, sure. So there are a couple of things that we are doing. Our youth space is within a high school. So of course, opening that space, really depends on if the school is going to be open or not. So once we get the go ahead to figure out what the timeline is for that. In the meantime, behind the scenes, we are putting plans together in terms of what that would look like. Our youth space is always packed with an average of 6 students or more. So right now we're having conversations to figure out how do we still have the level of impact that we do while following guidelines from the Toronto Public Health or even some from the TDSB, and still being impactful. So those conversations are being had to figure out what that would look like. And also even beyond that, our youth space isn't the only space where we connected with people. So figuring out how do we use maybe these platforms and continuing some of this work. I know that virtual programming is becoming a trend. Virtual conversations and supports are happening. So how do we utilize what's happening through Zoom, and even with conversation events like we are having right now? How do we continue some of that work that's happening in the youth space, but have it outside of the youth space, whether it's virtually or physically meeting up, depending on what those guidelines are.
All right, our next answer is from Logic.
Yeah, peace. A lot of what Mo is describing, our office space is within Monsignor Fraser College. So we're, still waiting to see what that looks like. But in the meantime, what we have been doing is just connecting with other like-minded organizations so that we can provide a lot of wraparound support in various capacities for young people. We've been creating platforms online. I know that there's a big, topic, and even for me, a personal concern is just some healing. We've gone through so much trauma in many capacities, and we're always on guard, and to have space where we can just kind of put our guard down just for a little bit and really just work through our stuff. So we're moving our responsibility program, which focuses on things of that nature, creating space for dialogue and vulnerability and people speaking from their truth. We've been moving that online with some of our groups and carrying on that conversation in the meantime, and just really showing up for young people however we can. And like I said, creating platforms like this. So we'll definitely have other speaking engagements where youth will be leading and creating space for conversation, and where we can have the community involved. So that's pretty much it.
All right, lastly, we have Nahuda.
Yeah, so many of the same stuff. We don't have a dedicated physical space, so we're typically in this situation. But yeah, we're working on creating more online platforms, especially in giving space to kids, because a big part of what we did was provide them with a safe space. And so we're looking at how to do that in smaller groups, online, maybe larger meetups with louder voices. We're trying to figure it out. Part of our summer programming that we expanded was we've opened it up to youth. And so we've sent each youth a kit, and they're going to be working on learning about histories of resistance through cooking. And so they've got their own pots, and they'll be cooking for their families, and we'll be sending them food, to do that with. So a lot of the stuff that we did in-house, we're just dispersing out a little more, and we'll figure out as we go on. But yeah, we're still going to be working on teaching teachers and getting educators to get on track.
All right. Our second question is for Tina and Chelsea. The question is, what are schools doing to prepare for next year? Tina can go first.
Sure. So right now, schools are still planning. There's a lot of uncertainty how the school year will look, and we're still waiting for direction from the ministry. So schools right now are taking it honestly day by day and trying to put a plan together. But right now, we have nothing concrete to share with you. Chelsea?
Yeah, I would echo. I think school boards are all waiting for directives from the ministry, and they can't technically move forward with planning until they receive directive from the ministry. So I think right now people are just moving forward as if people would be returning to school in September and waiting to see if they need to create a different plan that will change that. But that information has to go ministry to school boards. Then the school boards will decide what that looks like at the local level. And just there was a question in the box around how do we collectively pressure school boards to move beyond platitudes to real action and change. I was just going to say school boards will tell you that they have plans of action in place, and they're really great, and they're crafted well, and they're worded with all of the right words and sayings. But the reality is it doesn't go down to the local level. And so pressuring school boards also looks like navigating and advocating in each local level to say, what specifically are you doing? What are the action plans? Every school typically has what's called a SIP, a school improvement plan, where they are expected to specifically list the actionable items that they're doing in their school to address issues and needs. Parents and students are also supposed to have say in that plan. So you can ask to be a part of that plan at any school level if you are students and or you're a community member of that school to ensure accountability.
Perfect. I just wanted to ask a question for the host of the call. Do we have enough time for the third question?
No, I would say let's jump into the legal piece.
All right, perfect.
Thank you so much, Shem. You're doing an amazing job. You guys are brilliant.
Okay, thanks, Shem. The next section of questions is on bias, unfair treatment, and suspensions. We have 15 minutes for this section, so please focus your response on student and parent rights and what actions they can take. So the first question is, in 2016 to 17, the TSB suspension/expulsion data show that while Black students only make up 11% of the student population, they make up 36% of suspensions and expulsions. Nia and Nana, you both have done a lot of work around suspensions. How do you appeal a suspension if you think it's not fair? We'll start with Nana.
Hi, everyone. Okay, so I just put in the chat box the information for the Black Legal Action Center, our phone number, our website. Please, please, please contact us if you believe that anti-Black racism may have played a part in your suspension or your discipline. So if you believe that the suspension is unfair, you have a few options. So if you are under 18, your parent or guardian is supposed to receive a notice from your school. If you are over 18 or you're 16 or 17 and you've withdrawn from parental control, that notice has to come from you. And in that notice, the principal is supposed to say the reason for your suspension, how long you're going to be suspended for, information on any suspension suspension programs, information on your right to appeal, as well as there should be information about your specific board's policy around suspensions and expulsions. So first of all, number one, they have to give appropriate notice. They have to give notice. It can't just be a verbal, you're suspended for a week. It has to be in writing. And you have to get that notice, or your parent or guardian. So you have a particular timeline to appeal that. So a suspension can be anywhere from 1 school day to 20 school days. And you have 10 school days to advise the person who's listed in that letter. It's usually a superintendent. You have 10 school days to advise them that you wish to appeal your suspension. Part of that appeal process is actually seeing, wait a minute, was I allowed to be suspended for that reason, right? So you might be able to challenge that and say, listen, that behavior didn't occur. It wasn't me. It was the non-Black student who actually did X, Y, Z, right? Maybe it's behavior for which suspension isn't even allowed under the Education Act, right? So we have to look at the reasons for the suspension, or maybe the principal didn't even consider something called mitigating circumstances. And the Education Act requires a principal to look at some of the factors. And specific for this conversation, I think it's important to note that some of those factors include, was the action that the student engaged in, was it as a result of bullying or anti-Black racism, or trying to defend themselves, right, against discrimination? I think that's really key. And that is a mitigating factor. That's something that the principal should look at in deciding whether or not a suspension should be laid or discipline should be laid. So you have to get notice. The reasons and how to appeal have to be there. You have 10 school days to do it, to appeal, and the suspension hearing has to be held within 15 days of the original notice. So sometimes if you're only suspended for a week, you may be back at school before you even had a chance to have your suspension appeal hearing, right? That's fine. It's important to get your notice in on time, and it's important to participate in that appeal process. I would recommend, and I'm sure Nia would say the same thing, to have support, to have legal support. It could be a paralegal, it could be free legal services over here from Black. It's really important to have that support, because the school board and the schools have a ton of lawyers. They spend a ton of money on legal counsel. So it's really important that you also have that support for you to appeal that, right? And another just last thing I would say, they can't suspend you for any reason. There are specific actions where they can consider suspension or where they have to consider suspension. So I think that that's important too, that you're looking to make sure the action that you're being suspended for is actually something that you can be suspended for.
Thank you, Nana, so much for the information. Nia, what are your thoughts on suspensions?
Well, my thoughts on suspensions are that they are totally unnecessary, defeat the whole purpose of the education. By eliminating someone from attending school, they are disenfranchised, they already feel targeted, and they have idle time to be non-productive with other people who get suspended from school. It's a very huge problem. I think suspensions is one of the major reasons why we have the school to prison pipeline. It's almost like a jail sentence in that you've now been determined by the authorities in the school, the principal, the teacher, that you've done something wrong and here's your penalty. What I wanted to add on to what Nana was saying in regards to how to fight an appeal or how to launch an appeal. It's very important that you understand you have an ability to speak and you have an ability to gather evidence. And far too often, school boards, when they do their investigations, they use limited evidence. And I've done a few suspensions and expulsion hearings and appeals that show that the school has information that could actually exonerate somebody, but they choose not to use it. So my advice to anybody facing an allegation is you make a written account of everything you had as soon as it happens, so that it's fresh in your mind, that anybody who's a witness that's been around you or witnessed the events, they provide a written account so they can have it fresh in their mind. And then you go around and you ask anybody around if they've seen anything or heard anything, because unfortunately, essentially what you're being put through is a mini trial. The best way to fight an appeal or a suspension is to actually get the superintendent and the person who initially made the complaint to retract or reverberate or, to, step back from their complaint. Basically by saying, there's a misunderstanding here. This is what the student's doing. You guys didn't do this. Why don't we save resources and just resolve this? We've had situations where we've been able to get students to have their suspensions removed from the record without even doing an appeal. So that's also a tactic. But what is so important is that you document and you take evidence and you present it, because like Nana said, there will be a ton of lawyers at a table across from you. And if you don't have counsel, you're going to be at a disadvantage. But without information to specifically point to, you're going to be at a bigger disadvantage. We always think because we know something and we remember something, all I have to do is tell the story and they'll believe me and things will be okay. No, it's not as simple as that, because people don't believe you. And that written documentation and the other witnesses that will support your version of events are the utmost important to being successful at these things. So my strong advice is document, and then gather as much evidence as possible and make sure you've presented it in a very orderly fashion. And another thing to look out for is you're entitled to disclosure. So what's going to happen is when your appeal process or you're appealing your suspension, the school board is going to give you a set of documents in a binder, and it's going to look overwhelming. It's going to be all your school records and all the complaints or anything associated. Make sure you go through that and see what evidence they're trying to present. And then you can very much decide this is not even applicable in this case. And you can say, point out to them, you've provided this, it's not effective, it's not applicable, it doesn't speak to the matter. And you can even point out flaws in their own evidence they're providing. So it's really a legal fight, and that's why you should have counsel to assist you. But if you don't have anyone to help, or at the very early stages, write
Your mic is muted. The mic's muted. The mic is on mute. Nia?
Just that last part. Maybe say that last part again.
Yeah, your mic was muted.
I was just saying it's just very important that the students understand that they have an opportunity to document their information and present it, because that is the last line of defense that you have.
Thank you, Nia, for the information. So our next question is that we're hearing often from Black students that when Black students are assaulted, schools don't take it as seriously as when non-Black students are assaulted. So this time we'll start with Nia. What can Black students do and parents do if neither staff or police do anything to help or support them?
The best thing they can do is seek counsel, because when you have counsel, either a paralegal, even a community support, you don't have to have a lawyer. Can everyone hear me right now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You don't have to have an actual lawyer to assist you in this. Lawyers are always better because they know the law inside out. But even if it's a community advocate, somebody from your community who knows you or who understands law or who understands process, even someone who's volunteered on a parent-teacher council or something, that's the best thing that you can have with you. And just, if the police aren't doing anything, so this comes down to diplomacy. A lot of this comes from when families are so offended by the way that the teachers have treated them or the way the police have treated them, that there's anger involved and there's frustration. One of the most effective tools is going to be your patience and your reason and note-taking. You stay calm, you contact the police, and if you can't get through to the police officer, you ask for their staff sergeant. When you speak to the staff sergeant, you say very calmly and nicely, politely, there was an incident today with my child or my student or myself, and I don't feel like I was treated very respectfully. This is the police badge number, this is their name, this is the date, this is the time, this is where it occurred. So what police and staff at schools are not used to is our community and our students being very meticulous in how they take information. So if you have a notepad out and you have, or your video recording, or you're typing into your phone and you have all the information, name, date, time, place, who the officer was, badge number, those things are so effective in showing the other side that you're serious and you're going to defend yourself. So that is the advice that I would give to parents, students that are having difficulty with staff. The other end of the advice is do not allow it to escalate. Do not get frustrated. Do not say things that you regret saying, because everything's going to be used against you. So you want to put on your most calm, reasonable, serious face you can. I'm not saying you have to be nice, but you don't want to be angry, because that's always misinterpreted in our community. What you need to do is be meticulous, accurate, and on point. And that's the best way to deal with anything. And then call on stuff, call on people, call on Black, right? Call on Ma'at Legal, call on anybody you know in a position who has some type of respect in the community that maybe can influence how people are dealing with you, but definitely seek support. And if you don't have support, document everything you can.
Thank you so much for the information. Nana, what are your thoughts on this? Or do you have anything to add?
Yeah, Olivia, I'm thinking back to what you shared at the beginning, in your experience and not feeling safe and protected in your school, right? And by your administrators. And so I think it is really, really important, as Nia said, to get support folks involved. There are amazing parent groups out there, parents of Black children who will fight. They can be angry for you on your behalf. I don't think anger is necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah.
Freedom School, like there are some amazing Black parent caregiver community organizations who will go with you and, will really, really advocate for you. I think what's so key, general documentation is really important, but documenting the injuries, whether they be physical or psychological. So if you can see a therapist, a psychologist talk about the impact that the incident has had on you, what it's like to have to be forced to go back to school with the perpetrator. There's so many, kind of other evidence that you can gather to be able to build your case. And when I say build your case, it's kind of what Nia was alluding to, is you can file complaints against the police for, this is an example actually of racial profiling. The racial profiling definition includes over-policing and under-policing as well, right? So when our community goes and says, this is something that happened to us, and the police don't do anything, I'm reminded of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. And that is also something that we can, bring against the police for failing to conduct an investigation. There's also an opportunity to file a human rights complaint at the Human Rights Tribunal if the school didn't provide services in the same way, right? So there's an opportunity to base that in discrimination and based on race and all of these other factors you can do. I think it's also possible, that within the school board, you can push to, with your parent groups and your advocacy, push to the superintendents and push to maybe the Human Rights Office even to push for a safety plan to be put in place, right? If that hasn't happened yet, that's also something that fits within their mandate if it's not being taken care of at the school level or by the police. This is another reason why we need to start thinking and using supports outside of the policing system, because they haven't worked for us. They will continue not to work for us in the same way. And so I'm really glad that question was there, and that, Olivia, you felt comfortable to share your experience, because we hear this time and time again that those supports aren't being offered.
Thank you so much for the useful information. So our next question is on the school to prison pipeline and streaming. So data shows that Black students are overrepresented in applied and locally developed streams and underrepresented in academic and gifted programs. Tina, as a guidance counselor, how can parents advocate to ensure their child is in the academic stream that they deserve to be in?
Okay, thank you for that question. And that's very important because Black students in particular, have been streamed into applied and locally developed levels, which limited their access to university or just to fields which would allow them access to higher economic opportunities of employment. So the TDSB, the Toronto District School Board, has is moving towards what we're calling academic pathways, or which would be known as de-streaming, and ensuring that by next September of 2021, all students will be entering academic courses in grade 9, unless they have been working at a modified curriculum in their elementary panel, in which case it might be put into what we call a locally developed class. And anytime we put a child into a locally developed class, we have that conversation, at least in my school with my guidance department, we have that conversation with the family to let them know that they're going into locally developed, and that certainly will limit their pathway opportunities in the future. So we let the family know what the consequences of being in those courses are, but sometimes locally developed is the best fit for the student depending on what the student's cognitive abilities are. Now, if you are in a school system or going to school which still offers applied level classes for this coming September, and you are concerned about your child being put into an applied level class, my advice to you would be to speak to the elementary school teacher or guidance counselor and ask why your child has been placed into an applied level. And there could be multiple reasons. So maybe your child is working below grade level in numeracy and literacy, and they felt that applied would be a better fit. And that if that's the case, then you want to consider maybe letting your child take an applied course in grade first semester, and then having the child move into an academic program second semester, if that's a transition that you think would be a better fit for your child. Another thing is your child might be put into academic classes because, again, the board, our school board, Toronto District School Board, is moving towards putting all students into academic classes, or the majority of students into academic classes. And your child might not be working at or be ready to enter a grade 9 level. So you want to make sure that your child is getting maybe extra tutoring or online support, or is getting the skills and tools they need to enter an academic stream. Chelsea, do you have anything else to add to that?
No, just the other thing is, if let's say you've already been streamed and it's September and you want to say, no, I don't want to be in an applied course, I want to be in an academic course, you can also go to the guidance counselor or to the VP to move from one stream to another to get supported. There's this thing called a waiver that not everyone knows about. So sometimes they will say you cannot move from an applied grade 10 course to a university level grade 11 course, or you can't move from grade 9 applied math to grade 10 academic math without a transfer course. They can offer what's called a waiver, where a guidance counselor or an administrator can say, we're going to offer a waiver so that that student can be placed in it without a transfer course. So even if you have been streamed, there are options for you to change your stream if you would like to do so. Again, you want to go to your advocates, your CEPAs, connect with Black or other programs that are available for you if you feel like you've been streamed, especially if it's connected to your racial identity. So that you have the support to make sure that that's corrected.
Yeah, and to add to that, the only really and truly math is, I think, from my personal opinion, is math is a gatekeeper for so many fields. So if you have been put into an applied math in grade 9, even later on in grade 11, it's not so easy to transition into a college or university level, because there's a huge gap in learning that you will have missed from grade 9 to grade 10. So really, when you make that decision about math, if you need support, contact me or contact the guidance counselors at your school, and hopefully they can give you better support.
And
Thank you, Tina and Chelsea. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, no, my apologies. Do you mind if I quickly just add something? One other thing that I think parents can do to advocate to ensure their child is in the academic stream that they deserve to be in is that, if possible, getting them involved in programs like Success Beyond Limits, or programs that are happening across the city that are working with students who are transitioning from grade 8 to grade 9 over the summer, and possibly be able to get that first high school credit before they enter high school. And stats have shown in TDSB that the number of credits you have by, like 16 credits by the age of 16, it shows that, I guess, there's a huge impact in graduation rates. So, trying to do that early on will help support parents and advocating for that as well too.
Thank you so much for the information. Does anyone else have anything to add? Logic? Anything to add?
Oh, no, we're good, man. We're good. We're good.
Okay, okay. So the next question is on human rights and reporting. Chelsea, you're a student equity program advisor and do lots of student advocacy work. So what is supposed to happen when a non-Black student uses the N-word or any other form of hate speech? Nana and Nia, you both do lots of human rights work. Oh wait, sorry, Chelsea. If you can answer.
No problem. So the TDSV has a human rights department. The second that is reported to any adult, the adult is required to fill in what's called a 515B. I am giving you a link to that form right now. It's called the Hate Activity Interim Reporting Form. So what's supposed to happen is they're actually supposed to say there's an incident of anti-Black racism that occurred in the school where this student said the N-word. This was the outcome. This is the follow-up. So that's one piece. The second piece is the Ontario Ministry of Education specifies that there are things where, just like Nana said, you can suspend or you shall suspend. And one of the items in shall, as in there's no negotiation, you're going to do it, specifically says bullying or harassment based off any of the grounds of discrimination. So if you've reported that a prejudicial comment has been made, that is not a they should suspend the student, that's a they shall suspend the student. Again, the best thing to do is to always put that information in writing, because what tends to happen is you verbally say, this is what happened. And then when there's follow-up, I don't remember you saying that, or you didn't explain it to me like that, or you didn't explain it with such severity, or I thought you were working through this on your own. So putting things in writing is critically important, but that is a form that they are expected to fill out. And as I said, that would be a suspendable offense where they shall suspend.
Thank you, Chelsea. So back to what I was saying, Nana and Nia, you both do lots of human rights work. What can students do when they experience a hate crime? Before you answer, can you define a hate crime?
Nia, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go? Hello? Okay, I can define. So a hate crime is actually, it's actually a criminal offense. And it's committed against a person or property, and it's based on their race, sex, age, gender identity, gender expression, all of those protected grounds under the Human Rights Code. So it's a criminal offense. And a hate crime actually has to be public in nature as well. So if it's, let's say, graffiti on the side of a school wall, right? Or I don't know, the virtual classrooms that are happening right now, if somebody uses a racial slur and everybody can see it, that can also be an example, right? So it's public incitement of hatred. You know, we heard that in Ontario, like of the groups that experience hate crimes based on race, Black folks experience it the most of all communities. So it's of course happening in our schools. It's of course happening to Black students disproportionately. And it's really, really key that those incident reports are filled out. If they are not, please, please, please contact Black or Mahad or any of these supports that we've already talked about, because it's really key that we document and we get all that evidence. So please keep any screenshots, WhatsApp messages, Snapchat, anything, even if it's happening not in school because we're during COVID, it can still be connected. We just have to show that there is a nexus, there's a link between the action, the perpetrator, and the student who was the receiver, right? So there's just some things to think about there. Nia, did you have something to add?
Yeah, I would just say, I think utilizing the power of the school board trustees and your superintendent are also very important, letting them know what has happened and actually taking it all. Oh, I guess I got unmuted. Can
Your
everyone,
mic is muted. Oh,
can everyone hear me right now?
yeah.
You can hear? Yeah, I just had a call coming in. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry.
Every step of the way. So your teacher supervisor, your vice principal, your trustee, and then your superintendent. Let them all know what's happened. And the best way to let them know how it's happened is one letter, describe everything that happened, and then write all the addresses on that letter, CC everybody, and send it out one time. And that way, at least it's circulating. So if one person wants to ignore it, the other 4 people can't ignore it. And my other recommendation is using the media. Fortunately, the media can sometimes be your friend in the sense that if something is so egregious, if they know about it, once it's brought to attention, people act quicker. I remember in Vaughan, there was that incident where one of those school board trustees used the N-word there. And I'm not sure if she's still a trustee or not, but she got a lot of heat and I think she got pushed out. I hope she got pushed out. But utilize those channels, utilize the disciplinary mechanisms that you have, and simultaneously contact people like Nana, people like myself, who are going to be able to help push it to the next level. But you already have in your control the ability to complain and document your complaint.
Thank you for the information. So our last question is that we're hearing from our peers that when they do speak up, they're treated unfairly or targeted by staff or students. What can they do in those situations? We know each of you have probably supported a student in this type of situation. So this question is for all of you. Who would like to go first?
Maybe I'll just go first because my time is running and I know, and then I'll let everyone go. I'll reiterate everything I've said before. Documenting, I don't want to call it complaining, I'll call it reporting. Documenting, reporting, and then even taking the next step of going through your school's guidelines. Every school has a policy on how people treat each other. There's the Education Act, which is the overall provincial governing body, but then each school and school board has their own policies. Read through those policies and then identify where your school has gone wrong or where the actor in that circumstance has gone wrong. And then identify clause B, sub C, this was violated. And once you start doing things like that, people know they have to respond to you in a different way. They have to actually get answers. So my recommendation is document, report, get support. And then if you don't have any support, just do the work on your own. Get those policies, get those guidelines. They're not that complicated. Read them through, identify where you think the violation is taking place, and then report that and include that in your letters.
Do you mind if I go next?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so my advice would be find someone that you trust. It doesn't always have to be, an adult. It could be a peer. So we have youth leaders in our program where some of our grade 9 students are really close and have tight relationships with some of our leaders who are in grade 11 and grade 12. And because our youth space is located within the school, a lot of young people know if I'm having this concern that we're talking about right now, I can just walk over to the SL youth space, speak to one of the staff, speak to one of the mentors that might be having a spare in that room, and then take that conversation, like knowing that when that conversation starts in that youth space, that it's gonna be in a supportive way. So also thinking about those who sometimes may or may not, I guess, jump to being able to be confident to say, hey, you know what? I'm confident enough in myself to go find that supportive person or whatnot. So having those empowering those young leaders to support those young individuals to take that next step is huge as well too. So not just thinking about or making the assumption that every young person can already just say, you know what, I'm gonna go find someone I can talk to. I'm gonna go and do this. But thinking about that, the adult ally doesn't have to always be an adult, but also it could be youth leaders within your community.
Thank you. Does anyone else have anything to add?
No, everybody just pretty much summed up everything. I think the responses are incredibly great. And that's really what it's all about, creating space for advocacy, connecting to organization, individuals, people, however we can. But I think the main thing is really just speaking up, just putting that word out there and let them know that you're serious and you won't be putting up with these situations. So.
Yeah, and I just
Can I
want
add one thing? Oh, sorry, Chelsea, you go.
Okay. I was just gonna say, like, you also need to, when you put this in writing, you need to name it. This is an act of
Yeah.
anti-Black racism. You need to name it as the act of discrimination that is occurring, because otherwise people can say, this is how you feel, or this was an interpretation. This isn't an interpretation. You're engaging in anti-Black racism, and these are the policies and procedures that you're violating, or these are the things that you're saying to me that go against what you are saying that board is supposed to be doing or the school is supposed to be doing. And in terms of the piece around staff, it's the staff's job to protect you and create a safe, welcoming, and nurturing environment for you to be in. We get paid to do that. So if we are violating that, there needs to be ramifications and consequences to that. So in the complaint possibilities, there's also a link connected to the Ontario College of Teachers. We are a governed body. So if somebody is doing you harm or a staff member is harming you, you can also go through that process to complain against them through the Ontario College of Teachers. And they often discipline or consequence in much more severe ways than the school boards tend to do.
Okay, thank you, Chelsea.
Yeah, I just wanted to add all of the steps, absolutely. So find a friend, find a youth, find somebody in the building you trust, find a person in your family you trust. Call me, I'm Auntie Nudes, I'm coming down, I will get mad for you. Call any of us, but even call us for the language. Call us where to look. We can help guide you to those things. So you don't have to know all this stuff all the time. Know that your voice does matter. We are there to support and amplify your voice, absolutely. And so are your friends and family.
Yes, thank you everybody, the panelists, for, giving such good advice and such, answering our questions. But, I'm sure like some of, the attendees, noticed that, we're a bit behind time, but, just to like, dedicate, a little bit of time so that you guys can, ask questions, get your answers. We're just gonna extend that just a bit longer so you guys can get your answers.
And just adding on to that, I saw a few questions earlier in the chat box saying that how can we apply pressure? How can we get our voices heard and get these policies in place? Like, how can we get a safe place, a safe space for like Black students in schools? So the Black Youth Collaborative is actually working on an initiative right now, dealing with getting Black student voices and getting these policies put in place and put into action. So if you are interested, anyone, if you're interested in this or just being a part of it or connecting to other Black students, or if you know any Black students who could share their experiences or what they want changed, then if you could just put your email in the chat box, or if you're on YouTube Live right now, if you could just put your emails there, and that would be really great. So thank you for all the informative answers and taking the time to join us today.
Okay, so now that we've had this question answered, we'll open up questions to everyone on the call. So if you haven't already, please share your questions now in the Q&A box, not the chat box on Zoom. And if you are on our YouTube Live, please share your questions in the comment section. And Naya, one of the other Youth Black Collaborative members, will be looking through the questions there. And when you type your question, please also let us know who the question is for. So to jump right in, I've already started to collect some questions, and these questions are open to any one of our panelists to answer. So the first one is, what are the legal rights of students on university campuses facing racial profiling by campus security? Any panelists want to answer?
I know that at Ryerson, the Black Liberation Collective, I believe they're called, have successfully removed police from campus or something just recently. So it might be helpful. I don't know if there's like a larger, wider kind of organization, but it might be helpful to reach out to them to see how they have challenged it within their administration and their school. Because I do think that there is some organizing around how to connect Black post-secondary folks who are experiencing anti-Black racism. There's also the Black student associations that exist at many institutions and colleges and universities, so it might be helpful to connect there. But again, we also assist students who are in post-secondary. So if there's specific legal issues that you're facing, anti-Black racism in the school system and post-secondary, please reach out to us as well.
Absolutely.
Anyone else would like to answer? Go ahead.
I'd love to add that. So the same spaces that we are creating in high schools need to be created in post-secondaries. So we were recently happy to announce that we've started what we call a Jane and Finch community hub within York University. So it at the moment we have a lot of alumni or even current York University students who are from the local high schools in the area from Jane and Finch. Have a dedicated space to make those connections, have those conversations, and get those supports. So those spaces can be spaces where those in post-secondary, if they're having those issues, can go to and get support and start that conversation. So I think having those spaces, like the Jane and Finch Hub, in partnership with York University, if you have those spaces within other schools, it can go a long way.
Okay, perfect. So moving on, another question from Francesca. She says, and as an educator myself and a visual minority, I would like to know how to better educate my students about these important issues. Any panelists want to take on that question?
Yeah, I think there's resources everywhere. I think that you can look at your teachings and really look at how you can apply information that you already know and that you and your students can research together. You can also go to our website, freedomschooltoronto.ca. There's resources there. And you can also, as a teacher, look to your community and get expertise from the families that you're trying to support. They are absolutely experts and they are the first educators of these children. And so turning the focus to look at Black families as a source of power as opposed to a place of detriment is going to help you a long way in how to teach these kids.
Yeah, I love what Auntie Nu said.
100.
Encourage your teacher to bring community to the classroom. They're more than capable to get these individuals or groups or whoever it may be into the classroom. So I really want to ditto that. Thank you so much for saying that.
Yeah, I just want to echo like the importance of that. Bringing community into spaces of schools just creates that that connection, relatability, just that positive affirmation. And it just naturally creates like culturally relevant spaces by having people from the community there. So I think that great advice, absolutely.
And not community officers, community people.
Yo, can we highlight that real quick?
Actually.
Like actually create the space for community and parents, like you said, the experts rather than police. Like we're taking out psychologists, mental health experts, social workers from schools and putting police into these schools. Like that's what the focus needs to be. I love that.
And go to your parents and your children for their expertise, right? They have a wealth of knowledge and many things that they are never going to be taught within this education system. So go to them and find out what it is that they'd like to do. Ask the parents what they'd like to see in their curriculum. Get it more student and parent driven. It'll be a lot easier for you.
Okay, thank you. Another question we have is, what is your definition of white supremacy to the panelists, and how should everyone of all races be looking at these issues, at this issue? Anyone would like to take on this question?
Okay, sure. So, white supremacy, it's within all our systems. So it's not something that comes after our systems have been put in place. They are there, our systems are there to support white supremacy, okay? So looking at things like abolishing what is here is a good way to start, especially in your mind and with your peers and with your families and with your communities. But also speaking openly and honestly with each other, and really working on your allyship as a non-Black person, and looking at your own biases and how you're creating a culture of hate, how you're creating a culture of violence for the rest of us to have to defend ourselves and have to justify our lives to.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that too. Thank you, Nauda. I think it's really important, especially within the context of us being in Toronto, that we understand that everyone that's not Black is capable of being racist towards Black people. So it's not just a Black and white issue. It's a discrimination and violence towards Black issue and Indigenous groups. And everyone experiences discrimination that's unique to them. But I think that when we're talking about anti-Black racism, we really understand that we all have a part to play. And even us as Black people, we have to go through a process of unlearning internalized racism and the violence that we inflict on each other. So I'm really looking forward to how we can move those conversations, because I do think that all races do have a part to play. So I'm hoping that's where the question was going. Anyways, thank you.
Okay, so the next question is from Melissa. She says, I feel that this is the time for us to advocate for changes in Ontario, that we will see Black Canadian history and not knowledge incorporated permanently into the curriculum. How can we advocate for these changes so that something can possibly be in place for the fall?
Demand the changes. Go to your administrators and say, this is what you're looking for. Get on them now about the lack of Black focus care and curriculum that's happening right now. There's templates that we've created. There's templates that other people have created. You can make those demands now and include your trustees, include other parents, include the parent council, include everybody that should be involved. Anybody who has access to the money for that school, has access to who comes and goes, should be involved in that. But also as students, you have a very powerful voice. You all can create your own committees, your own groups to demand these changes. And you can come to us for support. You can go to your parent groups for support. But you can start making those demands now. You don't have to know what it is. You have to know what you want.
Absolutely. And also even just from a starting point, ask your teacher to set up a meeting and include certain people in that meeting, right? Whether it's the administrator, trustee, parent, that meeting is not going to be denied. And even just getting that knowledge to bring to the table, like how many people really know about Nova Scotia and the history in Nova Scotia. I personally learned that outside of the classroom.
Okay, moving on. Chris, a trustee, asks what advice, sorry, go ahead, yeah.
Oh, I'm trying to do too many things at one time. I apologize. Oh, what was the question again? Oh. Sorry, my bad. The question, one more time? No.
Oh, the question I just asked?
Yeah.
Sorry, where did it go?
Thank you. It's okay. It came back.
Okay.
So I think also what you want to see is you want to be very specific and have them document. Because what happens if you go to a school and you say, I would like you to respond to anti-Black racism in your school. The school is going to say, of course, we're going to do that. And we're already doing so many things connected to responding to anti-Black racism. And then you say, what are they? And they say, huh? Well, we have a section in the library with books that are reflective of the Black diaspora. And that's what they think the whole response to anti-Black racism is. So when you come ready, you need to come ready with specific actions that you want to see. I want to see documented the number of Black student suspensions that you have comparative to other groups in your school. I want to know what the average marks are of Black students in your school in relation to other individuals. What is the position of your school on streaming? I want to know what that is. Does every course integrate books and characters and novels and studies that incorporate members of the Black community? What are they? Tell me how this is being done in every single course in your school. You have to ask poignant and specific questions, because otherwise you're going to get a runaround that says, of course, we're doing that. but they're really not doing that. And you can access supports from people like everyone on this call if you want to know what you can specifically ask for.
Absolutely. I was going to say also, you can also ask about teacher training and be specific about what sort of anti-Black racist training they are doing, have done, and will be ongoing, right? One-time course is not okay for anybody else.
Thank you so much. Another question we have from Chris, who's a trustee. He asks, what advice can you, the panelists, give trustees like myself, and how we can become stronger, have a stronger community representation?
I think the advice I would give would be speak up when injustice is happening, and I think use your voice, especially in spaces that you may or not are being heard, especially in spaces where it's behind closed doors. I think being consistent with your voice and not just doing it in spaces where it needs to happen, but in spaces where a lot of that work is being done, and sometimes the limelight is not there, but consistency is what I would say.
Thank you so much.
Can I add one thing to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
There needs to be some kind of accountability though, right? Like bad behavior has been happening and we are the victims of it time and time again. And so if there's no accountability, there is no trust that, you know, one good trustee is going to make a difference, to be honest, right? Like there needs to be some real consequences when, you know, there's bad behavior. Chelsea mentioned the Ontario College of Teachers. I just saw a decision that came out where there was a teacher who was using the N-word like multiple times, and the reprimand is an apology. So, you know, I think that it's really, really tough to trust the systems that are in place. I think it's two-part. We need to continue to bring these actions. We need to continue to bring these complaints so that they're getting better at identifying how anti-Black racism manifests and the actual damage it's doing. But I also think that it really is on the trustees, these leaders, like for real accountability. If a director of education is not taking these things seriously, that person needs to go, right? Like if a trustee is, you know, not speaking up, like Mo said, we need to vote them out next time, right? So there needs to be some real accountability and consequences, because we just don't trust that these systems are working for us, because they haven't been.
Thank you so much. So the next question is from Sultan. They said, while these issues take into counsel or through process, would you say it's not advisable to take issues to social media to bring attention, or would it build momentum for the injustice you're enduring? Anyone want to answer this one?
I mean, everyone knows I'm going to get in trouble if I answer that question on camera, on recording.
Answer it. Do it. Let's do it.
Get it, Chelsea.
I mean, I think that one of the things for me is I do everything that I can to get students and parents the response they want from inside the system. If they are still not getting the response they want and need, and the system has said they've done everything that they can, then you need to go outside of the system. And oftentimes going outside of the system puts a very different level of pressure on the system to specifically respond to your issue. The other point is, when they're responding to your issue and it's public, then you start seeing this popcorn effect of other people saying, that's happening to me too. I want to bring this public. The more people who bring these issues public, the more we see this as a systemic issue and not a one student, one parent issue, which forces us to see it systemically and talk about the need for systemic change, not just on that individual response basis. But I think always work the channels that are put in place for you to complain or to access supports. But when those are failing you, then you need to do what you need to do.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. So the next question is, how do we get white parents to understand their Afrocentric children's discrimination in school?
I think one way could be understanding the definitions, same way we were doing earlier, going through definitions, and really thinking about microaggressions. So there are a lot of, I think, people who think that, racism is happening or discrimination is happening if an action is done, like, so-and-so called someone else the N-word. So there's individuals that would say, racism doesn't exist in my space or my community because no one has been called this word, or no one has been physically harmed in this manner. So racism doesn't exist. But thinking about the microaggressions that happen in spaces that you may not, be aware that it's happening, or you are, but not speaking up on.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think just having like real honest conversations with your children, really getting into what they're experiencing and really hearing them and trying to figure out what that advocacy piece looks like afterward. But I think really hearing what they're saying, and really sitting with their discomfort and working through those emotions, because they're definitely going to be a lot.
And can I also add, it's really powerful in this day and age to show the data. When we have so much data showing discrimination towards Black students, we have so much data showing that the disproportionate number of Black students are being suspended or streamed into lower levels or not even graduating from high school. And so I think that you don't need to convince when the evidence, the data speaks for itself.
Data and also history, for sure.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm now going to pass it over to Nia, who's going to ask some questions from the YouTube live stream.
Okay, so I'm going to be answering a few questions from the YouTube live stream. From Ahmed Yassin, he asks, what are some of the similarities between how Indigenous and racialized students have been, and what are the similar changes in the educational system that can be implemented?
Question. Right.
Can anybody answer?
Okay, so I know from a TDSB perspective, people see indigeneity as parallel to equity, anti-oppression, and human rights seeking groups, but because of the specific experience in a Canadian context, they see it as separate. So I think if you look at statistics and you just want to look at statistics, you can see that Black youth and Indigenous youth have much higher rates of streaming, suspension, not completing high school or being pushed out of high school. But definitely from a board perspective, a lot of the boards in Ontario region have specific and separate self-determined, self-governed Indigenous advisory committees. And so in the TDSB, the UIEC, or Urban Indigenous Education Center, sits under human rights, whereas anti-Black racism sits under equity. So sometimes they operate separately, though they all understand the importance of responding to the specific needs of the Indigenous and Black communities.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. The next question is from Terry Compton. He says, name grading, deciding what marks to assign based on knowing who the student is persuasive and harms students of color. Is anyone demanding anonymous grading of assignments?
Sorry, just before we have our panelists answer, this would be our last question for now, because we have to end soon. So you can email, we'll have the info listed later on where you can email the rest of your questions if you have any more, okay?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. It says name grading, deciding what marks to assign based on knowing who the student is persuasive and harms students of color. Is anyone demanding anonymous grading of assignments?
Absolutely. I think that's a very fair point. And I've heard teachers, some teachers are doing it. I've heard of teachers using student numbers. Instead of allowing students to put their names, they just ask students to put their student numbers and they try to do it that way. I don't know, Chelsea, I'm going to defer this to you because I know, been with the board for a very long time. And specifically to that context, and also you, Tina, as a teacher too, what are some creative ways that you all try to prevent bias from coming? Because we all have bias at the end of the day. Nobody is immune to having preferences. How do you minimize that in your grading process?
Well, to be honest, I haven't heard too much information about teachers who are able to grade anonymously, right? And this really impacts subjective marking, where it's subjects like English or say a written response in geography or history, right? But if a parent or child feels like they are being unfairly marked or discriminated against, they have an option of going to their vice principal or maybe the department head of that subject area and asking for them to mark their work, and seeing if the other teacher or the other vice principal agrees with the mark or disagrees with the mark, and can find an avenue to support that student.
Yeah, I would say there are absolutely teachers who I know who do student number-based marking instead of student names. But they will say that is completely at the discretion of the teacher. There's no forms of accountability to try to force anyone specifically to do that. But that's another thing where if you decided you wanted to bring that forward as a student or a parent to advocate to say, I believe that marks at this school should be done in this way, there's no reason to say why people couldn't take that up as an advocacy change that they would like to see in the school to specifically try to prevent bias-based marking.
All right, thank you. That is all the time we have. Thank you for your questions. Sorry we weren't able to get to everyone's questions. If you have additional questions or would like to reach out, please download the slide deck in the chat box.
I would like to give a big thank you to our panelists for taking the time out to, answer our questions, and to you, for taking the time to share and learn with us. We hope that this session was informative, and that you now know more about your rights when it comes to anti-Black racism and the education system. We hope to have a session each month, but we need your help. Please fill out a 5-question feedback form. It's super short and it's multiple choice. The link is located in the chat box. We will also be sending it through email. We just wanted to know how we did, what topics we should cover for future sessions. We also have a folder with resource guide for students and parents. The folder is in the chat box. We'll also email this out to you guys. Thanks again for joining us. This session has now come to an end. Stay safe, stay up, and keep being informed.
And also a big shout out to y'all as well too, the moderators and the youth that are involved. Amazing work in moderating this session. So I want to give a shout out to that.
Yes.
Best moderation.
And on top of that, I also want to add, do not forget to put this on your resume. It is a big deal, right?
Yes.
100%. If you need us to help you write that out and figure out how to put that together, this is a big deal. So thank you so much for doing that. Appreciate it.
Yes.
And please, if anyone ever has questions or you want to get in touch with any of the organizations, feel free to send us an email at info@stolenfromafrica.org or to get in touch with any of the panelists. We're hoping to do things every month. So please, please, please fill out the feedback forms so that way we can figure out what the next topic should be on and that we are responding to what the community is asking for.
Yes, and as I said before, it's super short and it's multiple choice, you know what I'm saying? Just 5 questions. And we really appreciate it if you did that.